In the 8th century's dim heart, Western Europe tottered near collapse, a weave of shattered empires and feuding clans. Once a civilizing light, Rome lay ruined, its legacy scavenged by warlords like carrion birds. From across the Strait of Gibraltar, the Umayyad Caliphate's advance cast a huge, menacing shadow over Europe's vast, vulnerable lands. The air was thick with dread and possibility, an era on the edge of wiping out or being born anew. Into this storm stepped a man, Charles Martel, the hammer, forged in strife and drive, a saga of clashes, not just armies, but worlds. Picture this. We step into a place where ancient Rome's shadows still cling to ruins, while unsure dawns break over early 700s Western Europe. It's a time teetering on the verge of disorder, where belief in the supernatural and survival dance a complex waltz, shaping the fabric of daily life. Imagine a continent mapped out by rival tribes and lonely strongholds, each settlement fiercely holding on to its identity amidst the breaking apart. Roads once orderly where Roman legions marched now shelter bandits and opportunist chieftains. In this mosaic land, old customs blend with new ones taking shape, all under a cloak of dread and doubt. Rome, that once mighty giant, hadn't fallen in a day but sang a long, sorrowful song of decay that changed the continent. Its laws, roads, and soldiers, spread across huge areas, had once been civilization's cornerstones. By the early 7th century, though, Rome's influence had nearly disappeared. The Western Roman Empire coming undone under attacks from outside, decay inside, and money troubles. What was left? A Europe split, broken into countless areas ruled by warlords who showed up overnight like mushrooms after rain. With Rome's fall, Europe as one unit disappeared like smoke. In a world with no central power, places went back to tribal ways, putting local threats first over big plans. The grand buildings fell apart, reading and writing dropped sharply, and Rome's culture's great deeds faded away. New power setups rushed in to fill the empty space. A scene once marked by Roman order now found itself in the hands of local strongmen and lower nobles. These new warlords holding power with swords in hand and clever minds. In these places, land was the measure of power, often changing hands in quick betrayals more than fights. Being a citizen was no more. Loyalty was personal, changing as fast as the water. People lived under the cycles of feudal hard work and the sudden ideas of rulers, tied to the land not for wealth, but to stay alive. Even with the hardship, people found reasons for their uncertain world. In beliefs that mixed Christian ideas with old nature customs, witches, evil spirits, and ghosts filled stories that could protect against the dark. Every sad event needed someone to blame, every failure a reason. The church gave comfort, its teachings full of mystery. Long trips to holy places and old religious items wove shared stories of wonder and fear into the everyday struggle. Life was a rough picture of staying alive and belief in the supernatural. Amidst this tough background, a new force rose quickly in the south. The spread of Islam grew with energy never seen before, starting with Muhammad's holy messages and moving outward across North Africa. This was not just taking land by force, but a culture change. Cities like Cairo and Damascus growing into centers of learning and trade. A new way of culture and money appeared under Islamic rule, putting a strong spell on Europe's weak societies. By the early 8th century, with Muslim strong places set up in Spain, Europe saw the coming wave with a mix of fear and wonder. To the medieval mind, Islamic army skill in a strange, seemingly not from this world religion seemed sure to win. Many Europeans felt underwater from waves of this felt unstoppable force, the shadow of Islamic taking over, looming large. Whispers of a sure fall became part of Europe's shared knowledge. Yet amidst these tales of bad endings rose soft sounds of a different story, of a new leader among the Franks who might stand up to this wave. What Europe needed was not another warlord, but someone to bring people together, someone to make the broken tribes into a strong force able to fight off the attackers. The way society was set up then made a triangle with farmers at the bottom and nobles at the top. Nobles had somewhat easy lives, safe behind stone walls and served by people who worked for them. Yet even they weren't safe from the dangers of medieval life. Power didn't last. Luck could change fast with the swing of a sword or the writing of a pen. Meanwhile, farmers carried the hard truth, tied by work that seemed to never stop. Yet this was a social weave, giving a sense of belonging amidst the upset. Even in dark times, bouncing back showed up. New ideas in farming, fighting methods started changes that would later set Europe apart. Old nature customs mixed with Christian ways, making unique culture styles. Church communities unexpectedly became lights of learning. Even with threats on the edge, the seeds of Europe's future success lay hidden within this strange mix of old and new ideas. So here we stand at the edge of changing completely. Europe is a continent about to change, a land where the past crashes with what's happening now. From this time of darkness, the first faint lights of starting again were seen. It's in this setting of not being steady and having chances that a new part for Europe is ready to start. The Battle of Tours would be very important, a small fight among many, yet one whose movements shaped Europe's story. Forces coming together did so not just out of desire for fighting or taking over, staying alive, religion, wanting more, and what was meant to be met on a fighting field to write a story that time would never forget. Join me as we untangle how these forces mixed to change Europe's fate. In the moving sands of the early Middle Ages, when promises changed like shadows and being a noble meant everything, a young Charles Martel stood out. Or rather, he was always supposed to fade away, an unofficial son of Pippin II. The cold rooms of Austrasia made fun of him, where his right to be born was just a soft sound among the loud noise of Frankish politics. Yet from this hard ground, his mother, Alpida, put in him a strong ability to bounce back. He was pulled to stories of famous fighters, and the sound of swords hitting metal stayed in his mind long before real life would test how tough he was. An unlikely hero in a rough time, Charles saw chances amidst the mess and grabbed them with both hands. His father's death in 714 made an empty spot for power, ready for a mind as sharp as Charles's, making his own fate from the broken parts of Frankish rule. Charles was not happy being just a side note in someone else's story. When locked up by his stepmother, Plectrude, he got free, not just from chains, but from what was planned for him. Set on his goal and smart, he got help all over Austrasia, turning waves that wanted to drown him. Frankish fate turned on his brave ways of doing things, using fights to his advantage, making deals, and being smarter than rivals. All with the skill of a chess player, seeing every move coming. By sharp talking and sharper swords, Charles changed from someone not accepted to the clear leader of Frankish power. His area, though, was far from safe. Charles knew well that armies were the base of any ruler's power, yet he saw far past calling up farmer fighters. Instead, he wanted to make an army of iron, a powerful force. The moving flag of his horse soldiers caused fear, as he thought differently about Frankish army ways, changing from foot soldier habits to strength on horses. Church lands were changed not into fields, but fighting tool storage, paying, feeding, and giving weapons to an army that stayed ready, something Europe had rarely seen. Making his forces strong, much like a metalworker making a perfect sword, Charles got horses and men ready with the same strong effort, looking forward to the excitement of fighting. Though fights were just one part of war, politics was another. Charles's rule wasn't just put together by force, it needed skilled talking. Being practical became his helper, promises to help each other his weapons. He made ties with church leaders, getting their holy approval in an agreement as strong as metal. The land gifts to the church wove his worldly goals into a holy job with singing and crowning sounds along with swords. His church promises made a weak Frankish unity stronger, sewing the different pieces of his area into a blanket of power put over Europe. Yet threats loomed like shadows. The Saxons tested his borders with harsh raids that burned the land and challenged the strength of the Frankish area. But in Charles flowed a river of not giving up, quick attack and run-back ways, knowing the land well, and the pull of having people tied to him tamed the Saxon anger. Fights weren't just about land, but staying alive itself, a clash of spirit wills and power on earth. Each test was a hard process from which Charles came out stronger. One eye on the always changing border area, he wanted to make it follow his rule. As tensions grew with the Aquitanians, Duke Eudes became a problem that could annoy but not bring him down. Aquitaine, rich and free under Eudes' smart leading, fought against the Frankish wave. Yet Charles, always the planner, launched not just attacks but a careful plan of mind fighting in surrounding places, making the hold tighter with smartness as much as with bravery. Charles systematically cut youths off, taking Aquitaine into his growing area. New ideas were his key word, and so it was no surprise that his bringing in horse soldiers was a sight to see. Moving like the wind, his army moved with a speed and a movement that wrote new parts in medieval fighting, making the slow foot soldiers of old look small with the quickness of horse and metal. People in the future would tell of the brilliance of these metal fighters, their showing up as sudden and as powerful as Charles's own rise. Knowing the church's role as both helper and friend gave Charles the wisdom to connect religious power to his goal. Holy people made brave by him carried crosses into places that followed old nature ways, drawing borders with belief. The hammer led not just with sword and shield, but with holy approval, a worldly and spirit mixing, making the Frankish story into something completely holy. Charles's name, the hammer, was more than just fighting strength. It wrapped up his never-stopping drive, a sign of the weight of his will that changed Europe's fate. Even with the doubts of real family members or people against him, his time was not just about taking over, but about building, setting up a base on which big areas would rise. In facing problems, his was the hand that would make a story from mess. The sound of his hammer still heard across time. As problems were getting ready from across the Pyrenees, with the Umayyad Caliphate's shadow falling long on Europe's ground, a time of judging was coming. Charles got ready for the moment, not just with fighting, but with smart fighting, knowing that everything, a continent's feeling of who it was and its future, hung in the balance. As his area waited for the coming clash, it was with sure feeling born not just of strength, but of reason. The hammer was meant soon to make a fighting ground into history. The Umayyad Caliphate came from the Arabian area as a strong and spreading force. Picture this, a family rule rising from local fights to become a powerful force in the Middle Ages, casting its long shadow over the area around the Mediterranean Sea. Under leaders like Caliph al-Walid I, the Umayyads mixed strong religious feeling with army skill, making a path of taking over that was as planned as it was strong. Unlike the broken and not sure Europe at the time, the Umayyads showed a united and set on their goal front, set on making Islam's reach bigger going west. Their plan was not just on the fighting field. They put effort into making cultures similar, building roads and services and running things in the places they took over. As they swept across the Mediterranean, the Umayyads carried not just swords, but also new ways of farming, science steps forward, and amazing buildings. Their system of roads and brought back to life cities stood as proof of their power, mixing different groups of people under an Islamic flag and getting local help. This was more than just wanting land. It was a time of change that brought big culture and tech new ideas to the areas they touched. Spain became one of the brightest jewels in the Umayyad crown, marking a key turn in their spread. It all started with the loss of King Roderick at the fight of Guadalete in 711, led by Tariq ibn Ziyad. His famous crossing from North Africa to the area of Spain showed the fall of the Visigothic kingdom and the quick setting up of Al-Andalus, a main place of learning, culture, and beautiful buildings. The Umayyads didn't just take over, they cleverly made power strong, bringing the Visigothic nobles into their running of things and quickly getting people there to accept them. Cities like Cordoba, Seville, and Toledo saw a new start of Islamic art, science, and thinking, setting the stage for a sure clash with the still broken Christian kingdoms to the north. Taking over Spain was only the start. Encouraged by doing well, the Umayyad forces looked north, looking at the areas that would become France. They were not stopped by the Pyrenees Mountains, seeing the lands past them as ready to be taken. Their sudden attacks into Frankish areas were marked by fast raids that left mess behind them, making the feeling of being sure to happen even stronger around them. It was not just being mean for no reason. These trips to fight were pushed by a hunger for riches and planned control over Europe's trade paths. The Umayyads were very good at smart planning. They used mind games to cause disagreements and fear, making the need for long times of surrounding places less. Their army speed often made enemies give up without a fight, using their name as a force that could not be stopped. Once in charge, they put in place good running of things, getting local top people and making sure changes to Islamic rule were smooth. This mix of army fierceness and smart running of things allowed the wide reach of the Umayyad rule. The Umayyad army was a mixed and trained force. For many soldiers, taking part in holy fighting was both looking for riches and a spirit trip promising forever rewards. This added strong feeling made them better mentally, which often made enemies lose hope. The horse soldiers were known for how fast and strong they were. While the foot soldiers gave toughness and could take a hit, their well-put-together army tool allowed hard movements and kept them together under stress, very important for their huge trips to fight. Their ways mixed being mean with talking things out. They used mind ways, saying their numbers were bigger and spreading fear to break up promises to help each other. Their liking for fighting in open fields showed their horse soldier strength. Yet they were skilled at surrounding places when needed. Cities willing to give up were treated gently, keeping people alive and property safe. Standing up to them was met with harsh payback, used as a warning to others. Over time, these people who took over brought in instead of got rid of local ways, helping different groups of people grow under Islamic rule. The areas crossed by the Umayyads echoed with stories of their taking over, casting ghost-like shadows on the lands. They left a lasting culture mark with areas changed into rich centers of learning and art. Yet the real truth of fighting, people forced to leave their homes, cities destroyed, and families spread out, stayed a hard reminder of how cruel the time was. Stories and old tales from this time became mixed with local culture, giving a complex picture of both liking and fear. The Umayyad growth was a story of mixing cultures, blending ruling over with making new ways of being. The meeting with medieval Europe was a place where cultures and thinking mixed, affecting everything from medicine to building styles. Such meetings brought a tension inside between old ways and new Islamic ways, making unique ways of being that stood apart from the rest of Europe. This mixing led to lasting things that can be seen today. Old writers often make the Umayyad success seem too simple, just using force. However, it was a smart mix of great army skill, being smart politically, and understanding cultures well. They used Europe's weak points, marked by fights inside and money society troubles. Their smart political moves were as powerful as their army strength, with agreements and promises to help each other, making their control stronger. By putting their culture deeply into the European way of being, they challenged the Frankish kingdoms and softly changed the continent's culture scene. But with every growth, a storm eventually comes together. The never-stopping spread of the Umayyads started tensions with the Christian kingdoms, especially the Franks. Leaders like Charles Martel started to make power stronger, knowing the coming storm. While the Umayyads' successes gave them trust, the unity of their enemies was thought of as less important. This was not just a crash over land, but a historical crossing point where the goals of big areas faced how long cultures could last. A sign of the waves of history that shape what happens to people and places. In 732 AD, Europe stood on the edge of a very important moment in history. The continent, once the area of strong Rome, was now a picture made of broken kingdoms. Western Europe's weakness was clear to everyone. A land with no strong way to fight against the powerful forces of Islam that had swept across Spain's burning flat areas. For Charles Martel and his Frankish army, the coming clash was not just another small fight. This was a fight for culture and religious staying alive. Europe's identity hung by a thin thread, and the Battle of Tours would either make sure it continued or bring in a new order. To many under Martel's command, the risks were a mix of personal firmness and a wider culture's decision. Facing them, the Umayyads under Abdul Rahman al-Ghafiqi saw the fighting trip not just as taking over, but spreading a holy purpose. Their win meant making the Umayyad Caliphate's reach bigger and possibly leaving a deep mark on Europe. As both armies got ready near Tours, the importance of the coming fight got deeper. Both sides had their beliefs, ways of doing things, and what they expected. About to be tested in a fight that promised to shape the continent's future. The forces fighting, though different in backgrounds and fighting styles, became mixed together at this key history point. In the weeks before, getting ready on both sides was very busy. Charles Martel, always the clever leader, brought his men together with a shared feeling of what was meant to happen. His foot soldiers, a mix of quickly gathered yet experienced fighters, understood the danger to their very being at hand. These were not soft-hearted hired forces, but men ready to fight hard to save their homeland. Practice after practice, Martel put in order, a close-knit strength needed to stand up to the powerful horse soldiers they would soon meet. The Franks got themselves ready, a force filled with grim decision. On the other side, Al-Ghafiqi's Umayyad army was a unit that had seen many fights, a lively group used to the fast winds their skill on horses gave them. Their ranks full of trust had little reason to doubt winning as they walked north. The experienced fighters stayed ready even with their fast move forward, pushed by promises of fame. This mix of showing off and getting ready made them a deadly force. However, both leaders knew that just having more people would not decide who won that day. Instead, clever planning and not giving up when things were bad would win. The two armies showed not only different ways of fighting, but also different ways of thinking about culture. The Frankish foot soldiers, relying heavily on the shield wall, got ready to take the enemy's horse soldiers attacking with quiet strength. This setup showed their group's spirit, a rock in the storm, made to stand strong and wear down their enemies. Coming from all levels of society, their being together showed a shared urgent need to save their way of life. Meanwhile, the Umayyad horse soldiers showed off quickness and speed, trying to get around and win over. Their past success across huge areas gave them trust, a problem now met by the unmoving Frankish defense. Underneath all the getting ready were the beliefs and old ideas pushing both sides. Medieval life was full of old ways, and this fight was no different. The Franks saw help from God as fuel for their cause. They felt they were protectors of Christianity, a feeling made stronger by church ways. Their attention was on God's good wishes, symbols meant to keep them safe. For the Umayyads, the idea of holy fighting moved many, a belief that this struggle promised not just rewards in this world, but spirit ones. Belief stood as a force not seen, both making soldiers brave and scaring them as they got close to the fighting field. As morning came near, each camp made sounds showing their different feelings. The Frankish camp set up on higher ground, buzzed with the sound of armor hitting, soft sounds of honest prayers and the sights of fighters making weapons sharp to a fine point. A hard strength filled the air, a group knowing of the risks at hand. In contrast, the Umayyad camp was full of energy, filled with laughter and the loud beat of orders, a sign of past wins. Yet below the showing off was a sharp knowing of the hard problem ahead. The fighting field itself became a key player. Martel had picked his ground well, using wavy land bordered by thick woods to make the horse soldiers' speed not matter. Set up on a high edge, his forces had a natural good spot for defense. Across from them, the Umayyads looked at their enemies, knowing the fighting field was getting smaller, but trusting in how fast they were and past winds. As archers got their arrows ready, the first sun rays shined on armor, signaling the violent events of the day. Finally, the attack burst out with the sharp sound of arrows going through the air, a deadly rain that started the fighting. The Frankish shield wall took the full force, a sign of how well they were trained. Dying became real right away, cries mixing in the fight. The Umayyad horse soldiers started their attack, a loud noise rushing to break Martel's line. What waited was not the expected breakthrough, but a hard, slow fight where fighting close up tested both not giving up and being able to last. The fierceness of medieval fighting once again became clear. The loud noise of metal, the dirt smell of fear and blood wove a scary, quick look at what war is really like. For the Franks, packed tightly inside the shield wall, every move forward tested how well they stayed together. Yet they held strong. Pushed by decision and shared reason, the Umayyads, faced with unexpected standing strong, fought bravely, trying hard to crack the strong defense. Yet even with their skill, the end of the day saw them stuck in a hard tie, the chance of winning tipping, turning on endless waves of attack and fighting back, leaving the future to be decided in blood and music decision. In the sharp, biting cold of an October morning, Charles Martel stood looking at the land that he hoped would change the path of history. His eyes were fixed on the high ground where the thick woods on the side stood like guards. It was here on this high place that he planned to turn the land into a strong place, making up for the foot soldiers not being able to move fast. A smart choice, as the Umayyad horse soldiers would find themselves tired out from the attack going uphill, their ability to do well made less by the very ground under their horses' feet. The Franks were not fighters made for fast moving, but rather for digging in their heels and staying put. In their packed-together shape, they became a living wall of metal and skin, set on standing up to the attack. Here on this narrow front, the numbers of the famous Umayyad horse soldiers, known for their fast and scary attacks, were made to matter very little. Imagine amidst the loud noise of metal hitting metal and orders being shouted, the small help the high ground gave, dust blowing around, making it hard to see, yet the Frankish people defending could still see. It was a small act of kindness, but one that Charles knew could make the fight go their way. The Umayyad forces were much like their famous horses, fast, strong, and scary good. These riders had swept across Africa and Spain with a scary grace, their quick attack and run-back ways leaving enemies finding it hard to breathe and lose hope. Yet as they got close to Tours, they faced land they didn't know, and that was hard to fight on. The smart setup chosen by Martel forced the horse soldiers into straight-line attacks. Their smooth moves stopped by how narrow the fighting field was. Here the land was the enemy, changing what would have been a smooth dance of dying into a hard test of wearing down. The Franks, with their simple faith, believed they were right in what they were doing. They saw themselves as protectors of Christianity, facing an enemy whose religion was seen as both strange and a threat. Martel, a religious man himself, became almost like a holy person in their eyes, his leading yet another strong support to lean on in the killing. Fights in this time were not won just by muscle and metal, but by will and belief, things you can't touch but are as important as an army. On the other side, the Umayyad fighters were pushed by a faith just as strong. Their fast winds were seen as nearly holy winds, part of a spread that could not be stopped. Yet at Tours, the very land seemed filled with a spirit fighting back, as if the earth itself had picked a side. The growing pressure, not able to break Martel's lines, started doubts. Old ideas whispered creepy things in the back of minds set on not being able to lose, shaking courage as much as the metal did the body. The fighting styles themselves showed deeper culture differences. The Frankish decision was in their group's strength, their being together showing how they stood strong. Order ruled in their groups, a slow but never-stopping wave refusing to go back under pressure. Their fighting way of thinking, deeply set in helping each other, showed the way society was about working together. Meanwhile, the Umayyad horse soldiers showed they were separate, each rider depending on their own skill and quick choices. Their being individual showed bright. Yet it was a light put out quickly amidst the thick Frankish fog. Amidst all these human parts, nature added its own touches. The cold in the late autumn air got into bones, especially those of the Umayyads, used to places heated by the sun. Water stuck to skin and armor, getting tired becoming a friend always there. The climate they didn't know pushed as hard as any enemy force, turning the place itself into an enemy with no pity. Mud splashed, sweat made them cold, and every breath came with a reminder of being able to be hurt. Distance, too, had its funny side. For all the Umayyads celebrated speed, the truth of supply lines stretched thin became a problem not seen but hurting a lot. What had been their strength, trips far and wide, was now a clear weakness. Far from home and their helps, the Umayyads found themselves digging into supplies, real and not real. In contrast, the Franks had what they knew, and being close on their side with local ways to get supplies and groups of people helping their decision. They fought war not just with weapons, but with shorter ways to get more. As the grass lay stepped on underfoot, this fight of Tours also sounded with big stories of belief. Each side, holding beliefs as strongly as blades, fought not just for ground, but for spirit win. This fight, painted by people who wrote history as a meeting of spirit giants, shone brighter than even the bloody small fights in their tales. The story would live on, made bigger by words, yet strongly rooted in the toughness of fighting, changing how people saw a holy war fought on these very flat areas. Below this grand show was the importance, not talked about, of getting supplies, a key player hidden in the less exciting but needed parts of war. The very act of keeping an army going so far from home bled into planning, adding more levels of how hard things were. Supplies became the lifeblood of staying alive, shaping how well people kept their courage. The Frankish groups, even with their rough needs, found comfort in things they knew. Those who held the power of food and things needed held the power of winning. Finally, with a chosen ground making his plan stronger, Charles Martel's knowing the layout of the land became his unplanned helper. The hills and woods, the very earth itself, became fighters under his command, making the defense line that could not be gotten through stronger. Here, the natural narrow spot of the place gave the Franks a simple weapon, putting their strength where horse-soldier mess would have otherwise ruled. Tours became a great example, showing that power is not just in numbers, but in knowing the quiet secret skill of the world around you. On a medieval fighting field, sharp sounds signaled the raw struggle happening as the Frankish foot soldiers stood shoulder to shoulder, not shaking in their decision. This was more than a line of defense. It was a human strong place, a shield wall, both physical and of the mind, showing the order that Charles Martel's forces brought to bear at Tours. The idea of a shield wall was not new. It went back to the ways of the Vikings and Saxons, but its showing up here was key. Set up amidst thick woods and uneven ground, the Frankish soldiers changed from single people into one single force, with harsh fighting shouts and metal hits echoing in the air, a music that stirred fear and hope equally. Compared against the Umayyad horse soldiers who focused on moving fast, this relying on standing strong in defense was a chosen plan. The Franks had picked land that worked against the strengths of their enemies, whose horse soldier skill had proved good across open fields. Made less able to move by the shape of the land at Tours, the Umayyad horsemen took part in a very tiring test of being able to last. Their fast attack blunted by the steady shield wall. For these fighters, staying alive depended on being together, each man trusting the one next to him, turning single-person bravery into group strength. Within this grim stage, the Frankish spirit was shown by how stubborn it was, becoming a strong barrier against a force threatening to change Europe's very future. Charles Martel's army wore armor fitting the needs of the fighting field. While the Umayyads relied on fast horse soldiers, the Franks looked for safety from mess through heavy metal shirts, thick leather, and strong head covers. This useful armor, coming from the Celts, was less about looking fancy and more about staying alive. Made to take crushing hits and very sharp arrows, fighters dressed in metal shirts moved in a regular way, the weight a constant reminder of how heavy what they carried was. The fighting field echoed with the regular hit of metal, a sound in the background that never stopped of worry and waiting. Armor served not only as something to protect them, but as a way of showing how important they were. Nobles wore more fancy suits, their armor decorated to cause fear or show who they were tied to. A Frankish fighter in full gear was a scary sight. Shiny head covers catching the sun, eyes hidden yet looking ahead, adding a feeling of fear not from this world. However, heavy armor came with its own problems. Getting tired slowed moves and fighting the heat under pressure. Yet being able to last was key at Tours, as these soldiers in metal stood as a strong place that could not be gotten through, a sign of Martel's force's ability to find ways against very hard odds. At Tours, the fight was not just between armies. It was a clash of cultures and ways of fighting. The Frankish foot soldiers, best at holding ground, faced off against the Umayyad horse soldiers, masters of fast attacks. Knowing their enemy's strengths, Charles Martel chose defense, a planned need against powerful enemies. The land, full of natural problems, fit into this plan, pulling the fight into a static meeting that made the horse soldiers' usual ability to do well not matter. The more the shield wall took the force, the less the speed help mattered. This fight was a quick look at army ways changing, with woods making narrow places that hurt the Umayyad forces used to open field fighting. For Frankish soldiers, knowing the land well fought against the mess of horse soldier attacks, forcing small fights into controlled meetings. As the Umayyads failed against the steady Frankish lines, the importance of group strength over single-person skill became clear. Tours showed how leaders being able to change, adjusting to what was happening, beat just having strong force, a lesson that shaped European fighting for many years. Inside this storm of fighting, the overload of senses was too much. Imagine the mess. Shields hitting, leaders yelling over the noise, swords hitting armor again and again. In the wooded fighting fields, sounds bounced between quiet and loud noise, while the air carried dust, sweat, blood, and fear. This strong noise you could feel could either make a soldier steady or send him into panic. The Frankish shield wall lasted through focus, feeling changes that showed staying alive or dying. Trained to stand up to such upset, every detail mattered. Sunlight on metal, a quick shadow among the trees, These clear differences set the fight's beat, a dance of life and dying under hard pressure. The order that Charles Martel put in showed brightly as his soldiers kept their shape amidst big changes, turning mess into something helpful. As darkness fell, the ground of Tours whispered of its bloody story. The shield wall held strong, stopping each violent burst, but even the strongest walls give some ground. Brave men lay beneath trampled earth, their giving up a hard reminder of what war costs. They weren't just people killed. They were friends, family, people who told stories whose dreams were put out by need. And for those who lived, the close knowing of what happened to them gave every move weight. The fight ended, yet the impact of those lost lasted. For those at Tours, being brave became a story passed down. Stories spreading across small towns, making people brave long after the fighting stopped. The shield wall stood as a sign of their bravery. A wall not only of shields, but of will that could not be moved in humanity's hardest face-offs. As the fight raged near Tours, an uneasy quiet settled over the loud noise. A short stop in the extreme mess. The fighting field was a swirl of noise and moving with the metal loud noise of swords hitting metal, mixing with the cries of those hurt. Soldiers stood stuck in fighting, tired from hours of never-stopping fighting, and the air was thick with worry. The Frankish groups, led by the never-giving-up Charles Martel, kept their strong shield wall. Their spot on the high ground gave a good spot against the famous Umayyad horse soldiers, who found themselves stuck in a strange way of fighting, where speed was traded for just lasting. The sun going down threw long shadows over the marked earth, making the feeling of waiting for what was to come stronger. In a clear change from their usual sweeping ways, the Umayyad forces got caught up in a hard, slow fight, testing how long they could last in their will. The heavy air was mixed with the smell of blood and sweat, each breath a strong reminder of the grim risks at play. Getting tired ate at the soldiers' decision, yet both sides held on to their spots, fighting for being stronger under the getting dark sky. This moment, about to fall into disaster or win, showed the big change that would change the direction of the fighting. Abdulrahman al-Ghafiqi, leader of the Umayyad forces, stood showing both smart planning skill and strong leading. His past wins had cut a wide path across the area of Spain, pushed not just by army strength, but by wanting to make the Caliphate's power bigger into the heart of Europe. Rahman's leading was clear, his being on the fighting field a light for his groups. Yet the fight needed more than his usual smart ways. It needed not giving up when things just kept wearing them down. While Rahman showed inspiring bravery and smart fighting skill, even the most experienced leaders are not safe from the destruction of war. In the hot mess of fighting, Rahman met a deadly end. The exact details of his death are not clear because of the unclear facts of history, mixed with both what's true and old stories. Some tales speak of a direct fight with a Frankish fighter, while others say he died by accident in the wild mess. No matter how it happened, Rahman's death was a huge blow to the Umayyad forces. Not just losing a leader, but a mental break that was felt through the groups. Without his strong leading, being together fell apart into mess, as not being sure took the place of order and decision. As the knowing that their leader was gone spread, the Umayyad forces reached a breaking point. Panic lit up across the fighting field like a cruel wildfire, destroying fighting plans and ways of doing things. What had been tightly held horse soldier groups broke apart into small groups of men, taken over by a strong drive to save themselves. The shield wall, once a strong barrier, now rushed into action, pushing their advantage against the going-back enemy. What followed was a messy going back, a not proud turn from attacking forward to a desperate running away, one that would become a sign of their loss. In running away, the Umayyad soldiers faced a painful choice, whether to leave behind the things they had gathered from their European taking over. Riches hard-won from attacked towns and small places that held meaning far more than just things. Under the cover of night, a wild struggle happened to save these riches. The mess only got worse as soldiers, once tied by shared goals, went against order in a try for getting things for themselves over group success. The riches, at first signs of winning, became heavy reminders of their failed fighting trip, and even the strongest among them were forced to choose between fame and staying alive. The Frankish forces, taking advantage of their new speed forward, turned defense into chasing. Their shield wall changed into a force that never stopped. Under Martel's never-stopping lead, they chased the going-back Umayyads, showing their planning dominance and looking at the fighting field again. The change from defending to attacking showed Martel's sharp planned vision and showed Frankish rising in this hard test of fighting. Their set on goal chasing got both the real and meaning results of winning, changing the direction of medieval European fighting. Afterwards, the fighting field was strangely quiet, the very air heavy with the feeling of history. No longer alive with the excitement of fighting, it showed the real cost of the struggle. Fighters who had fallen from far away and known lay as sad reminders of the day's cruel planned moves. The winners, serious in their win, thought about the cost of blood spilled for planned gain. History opened up at their feet, heavy with wins mixed with personal and group loss. The Win It Tour carved a lasting story, its effects moving through the structure of Western Europe. By stopping the Umayyad move forward, the Franks got a short time to develop culture, ways of being, and political scenes, setting the stage for European areas to appear. Tours was not just an army win. It marked a key moment in shaping the continent's story that was changing, giving the space to help new ideas grow and make families and powers' goals stronger. Though Abdul Rahman fell, his influence lasted as both enemy and unplanned teacher force. His fighting trips showed weaknesses that made European being together happen, making army new ideas and changes in army ways that would echo through history. Through facing each other, Rahman unplanned pushed Europe's coming together against threats from outside. His life and death painting a complex picture of fighting, working together, and changing completely. As the last sun rays slipped below the edge, leaving the fields of Tours in shadow, the fight's importance was felt past its borders. It showed the fierce back and forth of power, belief, and staying alive, writing a part that would go past just old stories. Tours stands as a key moment, a mixing of bravery and bad luck, wanting more and holding back, written into the soul of Europe for many years to come, whispering lessons that history might forget but will never fully silence. The Battle of Tours in 732 was no doubt a moment of win for Western Europe, a day the Franks would remember as standing strong against the seemingly not able to be stopped Umayyad forces. Yet the sun didn't come up on a world changed. The Muslims didn't disappear. Instead, they did a planned going back. To the Franks, enjoying their staying alive against these fierce enemies, it bought a valuable break to get their breath. Happy celebrations swept through the groups, but the marks of a continent on the edge was still fresh. Europe hadn't been born again overnight. It had only stepped back from the edge, given time to pull itself together to group again, plan again, and show its head once more. Putting aside the parties, the truth of this win was not simple. There were no big takings over, no complete getting rid of. The wave hadn't fully turned. Muslim areas grew strong in Spain, lively as ever, showing Tours as a comma, not a full stop in Europe's story. It marked not an end, but a short time to rest, allowing Europe's rulers a chance to make things stronger and plan, setting the stage for Christianity's slow coming back, together amidst a very mixed continent. Tours didn't mean the end for Muslim wanting more either. Instead, it was a stop in their movement north, a chance for the balance of power to change a little. The meeting painted medieval fighting in strong lines. Strong, personal, and very tiring. Charles Martel's skill in planning, choosing ground carefully, using thick woods well, locking groups together, showed medieval leaders the clear power of land and ways of doing things. Tours wasn't an end, but a powerful part in a bigger story, affecting fights where slow wearing down won over fast wins. Beyond the clash itself, the battle's movement spread across Europe, affecting politics, promises to help each other, and power setups. Many saw Charles Martel's win as help from God, raising his standing. It put seeds for the Carolingian family rule. And through Martel's bringing things together, the political scene of Europe changed quietly yet deeply. Nearby areas noticed, learning how powerful having one person in charge was, and changed how they defended themselves based on that. As memory of the fight grew, so did the stories. Churches and places where monks lived made it into a win from God. Christian strong was shown as a person. Songs and stories wrapped Tours in legend, making it a symbol of faith's defense against coming in. While trade and talking with other countries sometimes made these lines not clear, Tours became a call to action for holy wars and fights to come. Its place in old stories made strong by those who knew how powerful a good story was. Tours stopped sudden Muslim attacks but didn't put out their power. The Umayyad being in Spain continued, with its culture and money success remarkable. This setback caused rethinking and changing. The Muslim world, able to bounce back and planned, kept its hold on power around the Mediterranean Sea. Trade and sharing of knowledge kept going, proving that no fight's result could fully stop the flow of ideas and buying-selling. For Europe, the fight gave a planned stop, a chance to make defenses stronger, bring together broken areas, and set roots for growth in the future. It gave leaders like Martel a break, a moment to bring power together and push through changes that laid the base for the Carolingian Empire. Money and society coming together took hold, with being steady, making things better. Tours was mixed with Europe's slow change, making trade inside its borders bigger and indirectly feeding big changes, like the system where land was tied to service and farming steps forward. The lessons of Tours left their mark on Frankish army growth, the steady foot soldiers, the defense wall that could not be gotten through. It showed clearly the strength found in order and shape. Martel's story passed down through his family, affecting ways of fighting, getting better, and in the end inspiring knightly horse soldier ways. The fight was not alone. It traced paths that would shape medieval fighting for many years to come. For those living during that time, Tours gave clear relief from fear, a protection for homes and old ways. Locally, the win sewed groups closer together and shared win, a strong barrier against wild fights between people and threats from outside. This being together encouraged areas working together, forming promises to help each other that supported political steadiness starting. As the stories of Tours were shared, they mixed local and bigger stories, making a shared memory that made society ties stronger. Economically, this time allowed for trade and farming to start again, making growth possible that sewed together the mixture of medieval Europe. Chances appeared, towns got bigger, and new routes made trade possible within a growing medieval economy. A being separate that became very important in making different European identities. Looking back, Tours has a key spot in history. Its story talked about through the ages shows how the views and politics of one single event can get deep into shared memory. Tours was not the end. It was one moment among many, a reminder of history's difficult parts, a fixed point in Europe's continuing story. As kingdoms and big areas came out of medieval fogs, the lessons of Tours stayed alive. It was a sign of being able to bounce back, planning, and what might have happened. In the big picture of time, it shows more than a fight. It stands for the lasting spirit of a continent, bridging its rough past with future parts not yet written. In the time after the Battle of Tours, Charles Martel stood not just as a leader in war, but as someone who kept safe what many saw as Western Europe staying alive. The fighting field, now quiet, showed a clear clash that had stopped the Umayyad move forward. Martel, always watchful, knew the going back of his enemies was not their end. While the ground at Tours still shook with sounds of fighting, the hammer of the Franks turned his sharp planning mind toward making his rule stronger over the broken Frankish tribes. Local fighters, still feeling the thrill of winning, spoke of him as a figure of story like help from God, a leader whose being there alone seemed to stop change. Winning was a gift, but it was also a weight. Martel grabbed the moment to unite the separate tribe groups under his flag. In the strange quiet that followed the fight, he called on the nobles, tying them together through a mix of talking, showing power in planned ways, and smart talking to make deals. The Frankish area, a puzzle of clan loyalties and fighting inside, needed one central person to mix worldly and holy power under one rule. As he started planting the seeds of his story to be remembered, the picture of a united area was taking shape, making the way for the coming Carolingian family rule. Inside the area, sounds of the once great Roman Empire stayed among a picture of different languages and not getting along. Charles saw the breaks within his area and acted clearly. Making things stronger was not just a choice, but needed. His way was mixing talking to others with a planned show of strength. Giving out land became his tool, with pieces taken from a weakened church being things given to make sure key followers stayed loyal, making areas ruled by nobles that tied local loyalty straight to him. Charles Martel's great success at Tours also planted seeds for a family rule that would last a long time. As Europe lay on the edge of change, Martel carefully shaped his family's future. Pippin the Short, who would come after him, was made ready to be good at both fighting and talking with others. The Carolingian family rule, which would reach its highest point under Charlemagne, carried the clear mark of Martel's basic work, a picture in his mind made real through both army strength and a smart promise to help each other with the church. Making sure a line of who would rule that was steady, Charles mixed his story to be remembered with the religious and culture change of his time. On the fighting field, the things that happened at Tours marked a turning point. Charles Martel, always the one with new ideas, made great use of the shield wall, a shape that turned the Umayyad horse soldiers' strengths into weaknesses. With order and planning, the Frankish foot soldiers held their ground, showing a move toward fighting focused on foot soldiers that would set the way for European army ways for many years. But his new ideas didn't stop there. He started changing the army itself by offering land gifts in exchange for army service, a simple system of land tied to service that made the way for the fighter groups on horses. Martel's tie with the church leaders made his spot stronger. Though he often argued with church powers over land and power, he saw the church's chance as a force that could make things steady. Slowly, he gave back key church lands to make sure they supported him, making a basic promise to help each other that joined spirit and worldly power, a sign of Carolingian ruling. Beyond the fighting field and ruling room, Charles Martel was a talker with others of great skill. In a scene full of political difficulty, he made promises to help each other with European areas, such as the Saxons and Lombards. Through marriages, agreements, and defense agreements, he wove a web of promises to help each other that made the Frankish area stronger and made its borders safe against threats in the future. His skilled talking with others reached the Pope, putting himself as both someone who brought people together and someone who picked kings in Western Christianity, a feeling that would grow strong under his children. The hammer, a name that was more than just army skill, set his story to be remembered as a balance of defense and seeing the future ruling. In thinking about him not being in history, smart people think about the other paths Europe might have taken. A continent without Martel might have failed under the Umayyad rush, or never brought together the fighting back needed to push away those who came in. His ability to change in war, politics, and running things laid a base for a culture that in the end came out of the shadow of the Dark Ages. In society, Martel's power was deep. His time saw big culture and society changes, feeding thinking and spirit starting again. By making places where monks live stronger, Martel pushed for religious and learning change needed for Europe's coming out from old nature ways. His land changes and pushing for farming to produce more slowly helped the farmers, helping a starting economy and a mix of cultures that would show the Carolingian time of new art and learning. Funny things are many in Martel's trip from someone expected to lose to the very strong base of Christianity. At first fighting with the church, he not only got their lands, but in the end became the key part for their worldly power starting again. Once an unofficial son, Martel's rise to starting a family rule is full of things that don't fit together. A man who once seemed like someone outside, now a sign of being real and right. Looking back, Charles Martel's time is a complex picture made of change. His time laid the basic work for a starting Carolingian area, a sign of changing and seeing ahead. His story, full of wins and changes, offers a rich telling of being able to bounce back and having new ideas, a reminder that in times of not being sure, having a clear picture and being set on a goal can indeed change the path of history. Through Martel's life, one understood the careful back and forth of strength, wisdom, and good timing, writing out a story to be remembered that guided medieval Europe toward a new start. The Battle of Tours, fought in 732, is often made to seem more special in history books as a huge clash between Christianity and Islam. This way of showing it puts Charles Martel's forces as brave protectors against a coming Islamic wave, painting the fight in a simple light of belief and ideas. Yet this story-driven telling takes away the layers of how complex things were, making a rich history event into just a simple clash of religions. In truth, while religion was a reason, the fight was deeply rooted in politics, wanting more land and staying alive. The Umayyad armies moving forward was a real threat, powered just as much by the goals of a growing big area as by any religious fight. Through the lens of old stories, the Battle of Tours becomes just a story helper, separate from political land facts and culture truths. Over the years, making Tours seem better as a point of great civilization served different political and country-loving reasons. Medieval people who wrote history and later history writers often mentioned tours to make stories that fit what they needed for their ideas at the time, making up tales that spoke more to their times than to the 8th century. The fight changed into a symbol of a cornerstone in protecting Christianity, a comforting old story through which Western Europe made a feeling of who it was and a win over being wiped out. By taking away these layers of making up stories, we get a clearer appreciation of the complex power back and forth in human experiences, setting this part of history far past the simple idea of a religious war. From the very moment the dust settled near Tours, the story around the fight was shaped by the pens of people who wrote history having political purpose. Making things look good played a key role in making the fight seem like a legendary defense of Western values against Eastern invaders. The Carolingian family rule later set up by Martel's descendants had much to gain from pushing Tours as their shining win. The battle became a key part in making their rule right, painting Charles Martel as a hero of almost old story status. These stories spread widely through telling stories by mouth and written history, making a tale that lasted through the Middle Ages and past. Even today, the old stories around Tours help to make the European identity stronger, putting it against powers from outside. These stories weren't just history accounts. They were political tools used to bring people together under a shared reason or leader. This way of doing things allowed the Carolingians to make power stronger and write on history a version of events that helped their family rule goals. Understanding the part of making things look good helps explain why the old story of Tours has such lasting power. It shaped how people saw things by cleverly mixing truth with storytelling, affecting generations of Europeans. At its center, the Battle of Tours was less a clash of beliefs and more a meeting born of power and political need. Charles Martel was not just a protector of Christianity. He was a leader in a world full of quickly changing promises to help each other and fighting leaders. To make his spot safe, Martel needed not only to push away the Umayyad forces, but also to unite and make his rule stronger over Frankish tribes that fought among themselves. Politics, rather than only religious strong feeling, was the tool in which decisions leading to Tours were made. Control over land, the loyalty of nobles, and making power stronger guided Martel's actions. Goals he chased with never stopping wanting more. This complex picture showed bigger political land movements happening during the time. The Umayyad Caliphate was pushed equally by wishes for spreading, power, and control. Their attack into Frankish lands aimed as much for things to use, and land that was good for planning as any religious fighting trip. In this light, the Battle of Tours stands not as a single small fight, but a key part in ongoing power struggles. These movements show how complicated history events are, stressing political and planning factors in understanding the past. Beyond the win, Tours signaled a time of changing and staying alive for Western Europe's separate areas. The battle showed clearly the need for unity among the Franks, showing that staying alive depended on helping each other against shared threats. Under Charles Martel's guiding, different groups started to form into a more united group, laying the basic work for a central power under the Carolingians. This newly found being together reached past army being together, helping a shared identity grow among Frankish tribes that went past local loyalties, a spirit very important for fighting back both outside threats and fighting inside. The movements from Tours extended far beyond immediate outcomes, influencing policies and military strategies over the centuries. Strong, centralized leadership and standing armies became evident lessons from Martel's victory. Future European leaders reflected on Tours facing existential threats and often cited it as a vivid reminder of preparedness and vigilance. The battle served as a cautionary tale and inspiration, shaping military doctrines that valued strategic foresight and internal stability. Additionally, reputations forged in the aftermath extended into foreign policy, with cohesive defense mechanisms against invasions forming. The adaptable tactics embraced post-Tours resonated well into the formation of European defense frameworks. In this way, Tours didn't just impact the geopolitical landscape. It left a lasting imprint on policy-making processes, steering the continent through trials and transformations. The aftermath of Tours marked a cultural shift, catalyzing a cohesive European identity. This battle fostered a shared narrative beyond regional differences, emphasizing unity in the emerging Christian society's values. This burgeoning identity paved the way for cultural advancements, setting the stage for the Carolingian Renaissance. A revival in art and learning, reinforcing Europe's place on the global stage. As we unravel new layers in our ongoing historical journey, reflecting upon the myths and realities of tours, we find it's not an end, but part of an intricate tapestry. Imagining if tours had faltered offers thought-provoking insights into the fragile balance of history. We reflect on a myriad of paths not taken, understanding history not as mere static law, but as a vibrant weave of potentialities and choices that shape our collective journey. If you found this tale illuminating, consider supporting us by liking and subscribing.